So my name is Dan Seidberg. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm the president of I Am Responding and joined today by Chief John Buckman, by Tim Shurr, and we're really grateful that Chief Gary Ludwig was able to join us today as a special guest presenter. Chief Ludwig's the president of the International Association of Fire Chiefs and has some really important information to share as well today. So this is part 3 of a 3-part webinar series. Parts 1 and 2 were recorded. This will be as well, and the recordings of parts 1 and 2 and then ultimately of today's are all available on the same link you used to join this webinar at survivingtothriving.me/webinar. So all of the recordings are there, as well as some handouts from these presentations and some really helpful additional resource links that we've put up there. So if you haven't had a chance to participate in either of the first 2 sessions, by all means go back and have a look at those, and we hope you'll find some helpful nuggets in there. We do have bio slides of each of the presenters that are here that Tim can scroll through quickly. I'm not going to read slides to you at this point. Chief Buckman, I would hope you know by now, and Tim Shurr and again Chief Gary Ludwig are all with us today. So thank you to each of the 3 of you for joining us and everybody who's here listening. We have talked in the first 2 sessions about numbers. I won't repeat those today. We did have questions in the first session of this webinar series about people dealing with members and officers who really still didn't believe that this was real, that it really was, something small that too much was being made out of. I really hope that everybody now does understand the gravity of what we're dealing with as the exposure numbers increase, the death numbers unfortunately increase. But let's also keep in mind and be mindful on the positive side that the numbers of people that have been exposed, contracted, and recovered from this virus also continue to increase. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm going to start on my part today. We'll start with water's adaptable. You have a dinner plate, you pour water into it, it's flat. You have a tall glass, it's very tall. What I'm going to really try to pass on to begin with today is the need to be like water in these challenging times. These are times none of us have ever dealt with before, whether on a private business side, whether in the medical field, whether in the fire and EMS field. It doesn't matter where you are. These are new times that require new adaptability and new flexibility. So be willing and embrace flexibility and the opportunity to adapt to the circumstances. The more adaptable, the more flexible you are, the more effective you're going to be able to be. And really, in thinking through this, there really are 4 things that I've been coming up with and keep coming back to that really illustrate this, especially in the fire and EMS side. So, if you focus within the things that are within your control and don't try to deal with the things that are outside of your control and try to do so in a flexible, positive way, you're going to hopefully be able to be much more effective. So for example, instead of complaining that people are out, you don't have enough staff, you don't have what you need, the question that you should be dealing with is, what staffing do I have and what are their skills? How can I best use the people that I do have? Don't focus on what your current staff might not know how to do because others are out or unavailable. Focus on what you can control. What can you teach? Who can you teach? Who in your department can teach that? That's being flexible and adaptable to the situations and to the people that you have. A lot of people are focusing on equipment that they don't have or that they're running out of. You can't control that very well right now, but you can control how you use and adapt the tools and equipment that you do have. That's the part that's within your control. And, leaders in this time are, everybody that I've talked to is busy, dealing with a lot of different things. But you still need to spend the time to listen to and help your staff out. So instead of the response of, leave me alone, don't they understand I'm busy, I'm trying to do things, really focus on what do my people need from me? How can I provide that to them? This is being flexible and adaptable off of your normal situation and really working within the box that you have control of. So for every circumstance, issue that comes before you, really the first question should be, is this something I'm able to control? If not, is there a piece of it I can control? If it's outside of your control, you've got to just push that to the side for now and focus on the things that are within your control. So in the world of adapting, I know many of you on this are I Am Responding users. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I just want to roll through a few things in adapting to things that are available to you or using things that might help you adapt to the current situation. So we've talked, these were all things that we have had in the I Am Responding system before, and some of them that we've added that are new as a result of this current pandemic. So in our prior webinars, we talked about the need to be really clear and transparent with factual information, with actual information, not trafficking and rumors and theories and conspiracy things. So right within the I Am Responding apps, there's a resources tab. We've added links right in those to the CDC and World Health Organization, OSHA, Health Canada, and to the Johns Hopkins site that has all the actual live facts and numbers. So this information is right in the hands of all of your members, right in their apps. They just go to that resources tab, tap on any of these, it'll open up their website. So really just trying to help get factual information out to your members wherever they are, understanding that many of them are remote and not necessarily in the stations right now. Tim, if you can flip to the next screen. Right within your systems, communications are obviously a huge challenge right now. So remember that right within your systems, and again, remote, right from the apps, wherever you are, there's a whole mass messaging tool that's built within your system, and there's a whole live chat section right within your I Am Responding apps. These let you easily communicate with your membership from wherever you are to wherever they are, and simultaneously and very clearly. On the chat side, you can link the chat to all of your mutual aid agencies so you can communicate with all of their departments and their members. So really enhancing communications and improving that in these challenging times when people aren't able to get together for meetings and trainings like they normally would. On your next one, Tim. Also within your system, staffing awareness is becoming really important. Many departments, you don't want your whole staff sitting in the station waiting for the next call in many instances, especially on the volunteer side. But you need to know who's available. You need to know if you have enough people. So again, the available, unavailable tools that are in I Am Responding will really let you adapt to the situation. Your members from wherever they are can notify everyone in your department, are they available, where are they available, for how long, and that's going to pop right up on your screens in your stations and in everybody's apps. So that's really provides you awareness before the tones drop. Do I have enough people in town and available? Do I not? So these are, again, tools that are here to help you adapt to this time in these changing circumstances. Tim, on the next one, again, because so many people now are coming in from remote when the tones drop, again, the core part of I Am Responding is it's going to let you know who's coming, where are they going, do you as leaders have enough responders, where are they now, and you can also see who's responding from all of your mutual aid departments now. So you're able in just a moment's time after the tones drop to know you've got enough people or you don't have enough people, and you know who to plan for coming in. Or if you have too many people, that gives you the opportunity to tell a few of them, look, at stand down. We don't need 17 people responding on a lift assist call and all cross-exposing each other. So this all gives you that information ahead of time, really from remotely and right through the apps that everybody has. So tools that exist to help you in this time. Some of the things that we expanded on the next slide there, Tim, and tools that were already there. In your mapping system in our platform, you've got all these map markers that you can overlay on yours. We've added a couple of new ones for this specific situation. You can now mark right on your maps COVID testing sites, If your region allows you to do so, you can also mark right on your maps locations of known confirmed COVID cases. That really gives your members the information before they're responding to a particular location. So if you know that there's a positive confirmed case, it can be very helpful to let your members know that they're going to see it right on their app before they roll up on that scene, so they can take extra precautions when they do roll up onto that scene. So those markers are all within your system. And then additionally, for everybody who's on here, and if you can help spread the word, one of the things that we have done, Tim, on the next slide, is we understand the need for improved communications throughout this whole thing. So for any regional emergency management team that's not currently using I Am Responding, we've made the decision to go ahead and offer the system completely free to them through the end of this year. So again, regional emergency management teams that are not currently on our system, if you need help with communications, we're here to help you adapt. We'll provide you the whole system free of charge for the balance of this year, so that you can focus on the things that need time and spend less time on communications that will help make easier for you. So, again, these are tools to help you adapt. And again, I'll come back to where I started of be like water. Whatever shape is in front of you today, fit into that, make the best of it. And really focus on the things that are in that container. What can you control? And let all the noise on the outside stay to the outside. And the more time you're spending focusing on the things that are outside of your control, the less effective you're going to be able to be in this difficult time. So I want to turn things over at this point to again, we have a very special guest. So Chief Ludwig, I really appreciate you joining us here today. For those who don't know, I don't know how you don't know, but Chief Ludwig is the president of the International Association of Fire Chiefs, extraordinarily busy at this particular time. But we really appreciate you spending some time with us today. So thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Dan. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you. It is a true honor to be here. My good friend John Buckman reached out to me, and I owe John so much, and he has guided me in so many different ways and mentored me and supported me as I've gone through my career. And so when John asked me to be on this, I said yes without hesitation. So again, it's an honor to be here with everyone. And as we know, Dan said it, I'm just going to repeat it a little bit here, that we're in uncharted waters. We are wondering where this is going to end. I'm wondering where this is going to end. We thought we had 15 days to stop the spread. Well, now that's turned into 30 days to stop the spread. We hear reported cases of people who are in these hotbed areas, such as New York and Chicago and Detroit and San Francisco and Los Angeles, and I can go through the list of them, that if they have the ability, they're getting out. Well, when they're getting out, they might be carrying the virus, and then they're going to other areas. And so I don't know where this is going to end. I just hope it ends soon. And I pray to God that it ends soon. I have one good friend that I know for over 20 years. He's a fire chief that is on a ventilator right now fighting for his life down in Florida. And I pray that he has a complete and full recovery from this. It has affected his body in so many different ways. They tell me all his organs, they are actually giving him dialysis every day in order to try to get the virus out of his body and help him to filter the stuff that's going on in his body. So I hope that he survives, and I hope that this death toll that we're seeing also stops. And to hear the Dr. Fauci talk yesterday about 100 to 240,000 deaths, it's incomprehensible to me. So I pray that doesn't happen, but I hope this just ends. But we don't know where it's not going to end, and that is where we find ourselves trying to figure out, and we feel this loss. We feel as though we're not in control. And we in this business, fire and EMS, we're taught to be in control. We are trained to go to every scene that we deal with, and we deal with it, we find a solution, and we're the problem solvers. I have never heard any fire or EMS person get on the radio on a scene and say, you know what, this is just too tough, we're returning to quarters. We stay there and deal with it, and we fix it. We're trained to do that. That is what our whole career is about. And here we sit here in uncharted waters without the knowing where this is going to end at, without being in control to try to figure out a solution to it. And that is where the angst and anxiety and all the other things that come into this is where we find ourselves. So how do we deal with all that? And it's a challenge. So I can tell you that at the IFC, we're trying to help you get through this. We have a Corona task force that I implemented on February the 29th, well ahead of this calamity and this cataclysmic type of event that's occurring. We implemented a task force on February 29th, and I chose Chief John Sinclair to head that up. And he has a whole host of individuals on there who are pushing out information. We have also done some webinars also. They have produced a resource guide. That's all on the IFC's website at ifc.org/COVID-19. We also have some dashboards up there, impact dashboards, that you can look and see how many people in our profession are impacted by this virus, how many have been diagnosed, how many have been quarantined, and how many have been exposed. It's all there. Unfortunately, we learned of one possibly related death yesterday in New Jersey of a firefighter that also worked for a private ambulance company at a hospital-based system that may have died from this. And again, our condolences and our thoughts and prayers go out, and not only his immediate family, but those within the fire department and those that at his hospital-based system. And we're trying to do what we can to provide health and safety to all our firefighters, EMS, paramedics, and EMTs out there. And as I said, we have this Corona task force that is up and running and pushing out information. They have developed what are best practices. Because again, we're in new territory, things I have never heard of before, like a science officer in your department who is doing nothing but monitoring the science of what is going on with this virus and determining what is the best practices to deal with it. In my own department here in Champaign, Illinois, where I'm the fire chief, we are actually sending our fire trucks through the local transport authority, the bus department, if you want to call it that. Through their shop, they have some type of desanitizing equipment over there that they use in their buses that they're allowing us to send our fire trucks through. We're looking at, and I know other departments are doing this, we're waiting for the temperature scanners to come in where we can monitor the temperatures of our people before they come in the door into the station to see if they have a low-grade fever. I have 3 people right now that have a low-grade fever. Then we've asked them to stay home. We're not charging them sick leave. I don't want to incentivize them to come to work. I want to decentivize them from coming to work. And if I charge them with sick leave, they might feel a need to come to work. Stay home. We're not going to charge you sick leave. And it's wonderful to see that my firefighters, our sick leave has actually dropped, that my wonderful firefighters are coming to work. So we have this Corona task force. We've also, last week, I ramped up an economic task force. We need to identify where we can push information out on what this third stimulus bill, what is available to the fire service in there. There's $45 billion for disaster relief funds. There's other opportunities potential in there for fire departments to try and get some of their funding back, because we know you're exhausting your budgets. We know that you're exhausting your budgets when it comes to overtime for backfill, also potentially for equipment. So how do you deal with all these things that are impacting you? And so here's what I'm doing. And I can tell you my day starts about 5 a.m. when I start getting phone calls from Washington, D.C. and on the East Coast, and it goes to about 9 p.m. And, I have to take care of myself. And I had a campaign called, "If you don't feel well," before this all happened, "if you don't feel well, don't make it your farewell." And it was designed to reduce the #1 killer of firefighters in our country, and that is heart disease and cardiac disease. There are so many times that I hear of a firefighter who said, and I read these reports and I hear the anecdotal stories, they said, "I don't feel good, I don't feel well, something's wrong." And what do we tell them to do? Go back there and lay down in the bunk hall or go on home. And then I can tell you it is a definite signal, because I went through it myself. I have some stents in my heart after a training event, that it is a signal that your body is sending you that you have never felt before. You cannot ignore this. And these are firefighters in their 30s, their 40s, and their 50s that are dying after some operational or training event. It's the #1 killer of people in our profession. So my whole campaign is about, if you don't feel well, don't make it your farewell. We got to stop sending people back to the bunk hall. We got to stop people from going home. At a minimum, you got to put them on a monitor and see what's going on. And so that whole campaign has kind of been put off a little bit because we're dealing with this crisis. But I'm kind of taking a spin on this and saying, if you don't feel well, stay home. And if you have a low-grade fever, if you have a cough, if you have anything of any flu-like symptoms at home, stay home. Don't come in and infect the people inside your station. Don't go on calls and infect others. You got to stay home. So if you don't feel well, stay home, get well. And when this is all over, and this will be over one day, that we're going to resurrect this campaign. If you don't feel well, don't make it your farewell. We have more videos and more messaging to come out. So what am I doing as president of the IFC, and to try to make sure that I don't become overwhelmed and my health doesn't deteriorate? Because as I said, my day starts about 5 a.m. I'm in the Central time zone. Those calls start about 6 a.m. on the Eastern time zone, which is 5 a.m. my time. Text messages all day while I've been sitting here. I got my phone on mute, and I can see all the text messages and some of the phone calls that are backed up. And I'll get to those when we're done. But I've been looking at, and I have read a book prior to this even coming out called Stillness is the Key. It talks about Stoicism, and is written by a gentleman by the name of Ryan Holiday. And he talks about, even going back in ancient times, of people who practiced Stoicism. And it was, Seneca, the Greek philosopher, did. Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman soldier. I think it's Roman. I don't think he was a Caesar, but I think he was some type in the higher Roman echelon. But he practiced. The list of people who have practiced this go on. And stillness is the key. Is not about being inactive, but the whole book is about creating a doorway to mastery, if I'm saying that correctly, discipline and focus. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to not put everything into one bucket, because eventually that bucket's going to overflow. And you have to focus. You have to gain some self-discipline. And you also have to develop some self-mastery to yourself and what's going on in your career. Because again, we are in uncharted waters. You're going to feel a sense of angst. You're going to feel anxiety because you can't fix this. And so that's one of the things that I'm doing, is trying to gain that self-mastery and control. And even if I have to remain inactive, close the door and shut off all the phones and computers and just regroup, I do that. What else am I doing? And this is unfathomable to my wife, because she knows I'm up to usually after midnight or so. I usually am working on something or writing a book or doing whatever. I am forcing myself, which is, again, unheard of for me. At 9 p.m., I am going to bed. I'm getting rest. I'm getting sleep. I usually am only good for about 4 hours. That's all I usually need, about 4 or 5 hours sleep. And I am forcing myself to get 6, 7, maybe even 8 hours of sleep. I'm forcing myself to do that. And how am I doing that? Because I lay there and it's hard to get to sleep. I take some melatonin. It's a natural substance, which is only 5 milligrams. And I take that, and before I know it, I'm off to sleep. Unfortunately, I had to get up and go to a fire last night, but that's okay. When I got back, I took another 5 milligrams of melatonin. It's a natural substance, hormone that occurs in your body. And I was back to sleep again. And of course, the text messaging started about 5 o'clock again this morning. But your body has to get rest. Your mind has to get rest through all this. There is no way, if you look at any other way of doing things, a horse, there's no way a horse can continue to run without rest. A car eventually is going to need maintenance. It can't continue to run without rest. And stopping and getting some maintenance, getting some fuel, whatever the case might be. Our bodies and our minds are no different. And so we have to treat ourselves that way. So as I stop, I want to encourage you all to get rest. I want you to practice some stoicism, some inactivity, so you can gain some discipline, some focus, some self-mastery of your life. And then you can rise up and meet the challenges that are going to greet you the next day. and you will find solutions. And lastly, before I close out, Dan and Tim and John, I want to say this, that there's always a green light at the end of the red light. And we are at a red light now, and we will eventually get to a green light. We are a very resilient people. The American people are very resilient. We will get through this. We will find solutions. There are people out there right now finding solutions. Our manufacturers are rising to the challenge. Our first responders have risen to the challenge. We will get through this. There is a green light, and I have no doubt we will get to that green light. And with that said, I want to say, God bless you all. God bless the United States of America, and God bless all our first responders, our police officers, our nurses, our doctors, our firefighters, our paramedics, and our EMTs. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today.
Chief, thank you. Really greatly appreciate your time, your words, your message in a time like this. You know, everybody's everybody's got challenges, huge challenges, and you surely have them in your lap, and really, really appreciate you sharing that with us today. And again, let me just echo, whatever we can do to help push out the IFC's messaging, by all means, let us know, and we'll help work through that with you. Definitely appreciate that.
Thank you, Dan.
Chief Buckman, I'm going to turn this over to you at this point. I know you've got some sage words to share with us this afternoon, so I'll turn it over to you.
All right, Dan, thank you very much. And Gary, thank you for coming on with us today. And you have some really, really good advice that I realize that people will listen to your comments and listen to your information and make the right decision that is in their best interest. So this being our third webinar, you know, it's like what I wanted to talk about was about sharing the load. And Dan talked about that in his presentation a little bit. And one of the things that Dan said was that I want to echo is we should be concerned about the things that we can control. We can't control everything in our world today, even though, as Gary said, we like control and we like to be able to perform in that way. So I would encourage us to realize that there are things you can't control and don't be worried about them. I want to play this little song here, if it works right. I say yes, man, fill her up. Tell me something good that I don't know. 'Cause this world's been kicking my behind. Life ain't been a friend of mine. Lately I've been feeling kind of low. And she looked back over her shoulder, pointed at the sign hanging up on the wall to say everything's gonna be all right. Everything's gonna be all right. Now, as Gary said, there is a green light that comes after the red light. That song, Everything's Gonna Be All Right, by David Lee Murphy and Kenny Chesney, is my 6-year-old granddaughter Kate's, one of her 2 favorite songs. And when she gets in the car or I see her, she always wants to sing that song to me. I don't know how we got into that, but we got into that. And it really makes me, it uplifts me. It brings a smile to my face. And so when you look at all the challenges that we have at this time in our lives, at this time in our career, it is so important to feed yourself with positive things. Our roles are changing. We are not a one-man band. Tim, go ahead and move to the next slide. We have long-term changes in our duties, our responsibilities, and the public's expectations. It is those changes in the public's expectations that are going to create additional challenges for our organizations in the future. And we are I'm looking at primarily the volunteer staffed organization as well as the combination staffed organizations. In the volunteer staffed organizations, we are already probably as busy as we can be. But the public's going to have changes in their expectations, and they're going to ask our organizations to do more. We are going to have to expand our leadership ability to help our community understand what they're going to have to do in order to survive this particular pandemic, as well as other health challenges that will become, or that may be coming at a later time. So when you look at that, is how do we organize this? And Dr. Pat Lynch in our second webinar mentioned using the incident command system. And so I want to talk about how do we use the incident command system to manage the coronavirus incident. And many of you are probably saying, oh, well, we're already doing that. Well, many of us, I know, in talking to fire chiefs around the country, many of us are not thinking about how we use the incident command system to help us manage the incident. So Dan or Tim, go to the next slide. So we all know about the incident command system. We all know about the positions, the different positions and the sub positions and so on and so forth, from command to PIO to intelligence and, you know, that sort of thing. And Gary mentioned a scientist actually doing work for the fire department. Well, that's where I'm going to say that's where the intelligence division is going to be the one that's going to be doing some of that research. And even in the smallest fire departments, as the fire chief, you are the incident commander responsible for the overall coordination of this incident. But look at all the things that you're having to do. You cannot do this by yourself. You need to share the duties and responsibilities with other people. And you know what? Your members want to help. They want to be involved. They do not want to be sitting on the sidelines. They want to be put in the game. Put me in, coach. They're just waiting. Most of them are waiting for you to ask. So we look at the positions: public information officer, managing social media, general media. Social media is so important today to make sure that the right information gets out to your community, not bogus information. So this PIOs, their role is changing in that we're going to have to manage social media. Even, you know, in the Joint Operations Center, Joint Information Center that many of us use when we're operating in EOC, managing social media information is a key component to getting information out. Well, it may be a key component in your particular area because your people are listening to your fire department and they want to know what it is you're going to do. What is the fire department doing? Public information officers going to need to be telling that. We need to tell our story. We need to brag. It's not to take anything away from the fire department or from the police department or from public health or from hospitals or nurses or doctors, but the fire department is playing a significant role in how we are managing our incidents, how we are managing the incidents that our community is throwing at us. So look at how this PIO can start formulating information to brag about the things that the fire department is providing. Intelligence, researching information. There is so much information out there. Dan has talked about this a couple times on our webinars a couple times before about who do you get information from. It's not social media. It's from places like the CDC or OSHA or Johns Hopkins University, reliable places that you can get information to share with the public in your area, because we're getting bombarded with news media reports. I mean, the news media has 24 hours to fill, and they just need to find some talking head to come on. They don't always verify that that talking head is actually giving good information out. The safety officer. I'm going to say that the safety officer is responsible for policies and procedures and coordinating communications to members. That may be a little bit of a twist on what the safety officer does, but the third part the safety officer is going to do is to make sure that we provide training for members to comply with updated and current policies and procedures. So the safety officer is not the one necessarily that's going to be going out there responding on calls and that sort of thing, but they're going to be the ones who are going to make sure that we have policies and procedures, we've communicated those policies and procedures to members, and we're training them on how to do that. Then the general staff position is liaison. We have multiple agencies that we're coordinating with that they're coordinating with us. And we have new agencies that we're coordinating with. They are not able to, these are people, organizations that we haven't dealt with before. They're not our normal agencies. So the liaison officer is going to be a key component of our general staff. All right, Tim, move to the next slide. A big part of our position is going to be operations. The public expects us to respond to calls. They're going to have a medical emergency. They're going to dial 911, and they're going to expect the fire department and or the ambulance, depending on if it's provided by the fire department or provided by a third service. But somebody's going to have to coordinate the emergency response deployment. And the deployment is what has changed today. Used to be, we may respond to a call and we would rush in a building with 2, 3, or maybe even 4 people. Today, based upon information, current information that I see, we need to reduce the risk to our personnel by limiting the number of people that respond to a call. I'm sorry, that deploy interior to a structure. Foreign to us would be to actually walk up to somebody's porch, stand on their porch 6 feet from their door, ask them to come outside and do an interview before we actually go in, based upon information that dispatch may have relayed to us. So we have to look at our deployment procedures. And then even if we do decide to deploy to the interior of a structure, deploy one person, limit the exposure. We don't know how bad this virus is. We don't know how many people are affected and impacted by this disease. The incubation period is significant. It takes time. So we have to look at current policies and procedures. Most of our states are putting that out. International Association of Fire Chiefs are putting that out. Again, I encourage you, as Gary Ludwig said, to go look at ifc.org, look at the COVID-19 stuff, and make sure that that you're using the current information that's out there. Gary Ludwig mentioned about finance. How do we pay for what we need? Yes, there is a stimulus package, and we know that the fire service was left out of that. We did not to take anything away from the other organizations, but we're the first one in many cases dealing with the issue. We're the ones dealing with this virus when they dial 911. So how do we pay for the supplies, the resources? In the volunteer world, we have volunteers that are missing work, that maybe are taking off work to be able to respond to call. So we need to look at, how do we pay for what we need? Does it require special ordinances? Is there grants that are available? Local, state, and federal funding sources. I was so glad that President Ludwig implemented a finance task force last week to start searching for money that can be used to pay for the services that we have to provide as a fire department. And because that's going to be a big deal. We know this stuff is expensive. We know these supplies are expensive. And even though we have a lot of people, a lot of our community friends are making masks for us, but that's only one part of what we need. But finance is going to be a big component. And again, I'm looking at you as the incident commander. You can't do all these things and do them well. None of us have very few of us have the capability as an individual to do just the things that I've listed here on the screen, on these 2 screens, and do them well and make sure that we don't miss something else. So I'm going to encourage you to use the incident command system, operate just like you would on a large structure fire or a large commercial occupancy. Fill out these positions, write it up on the board, assign people to do these functions, give them the opportunities to participate and contribute to helping save the lives and property in their community. So Tim, next slide. So I know when we started this webinar, the first webinar, we talked about how do you manage in a stressful situation. And Dan mentioned about water. But it's pretty ironic because I'm going to talk about the cup runneth over. And how is that glass of water impacting your ability? And by that, I mean, how is your stress level? How are we managing our stress level? How are we managing those stressful situations that are impacting our ability to be able to perform? Next slide, Tim, please. We all know about the glass. You look at a glass, is it half full or half empty? And where do you figure that out? Well, when we wrote the Yellow Ribbon Report, we used this analogy, is that as you build your stress level, as you have multiple events, traumatic events that impact you, it's not usually that one event that impacts you. It's an accumulation of events that impact you. And when your glass becomes full, you're at the breaking point, and then you have another incident and your glass runneth over. Well, when your glass runneth over, it creates a new problem for you. What it's telling you is stress is not being managed. We have to learn how we can delete or empty some of those things that are creating stressful situations. And we do that through delegation. So how do we know if we're not managing our stress levels and our stress situations very well? Well, here's some ones right there on the screen for you. These are not, this is John Buckman's ideas. I didn't get this from some scientist. So, you know, I'm sure there are a couple that are missed here, but you know, when you have mood swings, and I would tell you to talk to your spouse, ask your spouse how your mood is, because that person who is your spouse knows you better than anybody else on this earth. And you need to talk to them and ask them how your stress level is being managed, because they're going to know it better than you. Over the next couple months, if you start to experience weight loss because you're not eating properly or because of the amount of stress that you're having, maybe you've handled your moods and you have it under control, but you're starting to lose weight. You know, I can tell you, you know, a couple times that I've been under a stressful situation. When I got a divorce 28 years ago, I lost weight. It was not necessarily pleasant. It wasn't pleasant, not necessarily. It wasn't pleasant. And I lost weight. Well, that was because I did not manage my stress very well. So when you look at that, that's another signal. Appetite changes. You don't like to eat. You got to eat. As Gary said, you got to get rest. Sleep is out of whack. And you're increasing use of alcohol or drugs. Now, especially not the time to be doing that. If you think you're starting to drink more, or you go home at night, you need a drink of alcohol to go to sleep, or you're taking more pills than you should be taking, ask for help. Please ask for help. Or you get sick more often. You know, how do we get sick? Well, we get sick because of stress. And again, it creates problems for us. So again, we encourage you to look at, if you're getting sick, you're feeling bad, not because you're contracting the coronavirus, you're just feeling bad. Is that creating a problem for you? Aches and pains. You know, we all have aches and pains. And as you get older, that is, you know, a normal part of aging process. Are you getting enough exercise? If the aches and pains are flaring up repeatedly, go see a doctor. If they don't subside like they used to, go see a doctor. Don't ignore the signs and symptoms that your body is providing with you. All right, Tim, next slide. Ask for help before it is too late. This is such a key component, whether it's going to see the doctor because of aches and pains, going to see the doctor because you're not sleeping well, going to see a doctor because you need some mental wellness. You need to have your mental status helped. Nothing wrong with asking for help. Going back to Gary Ludwig's comment earlier, we don't like asking for help. We like to be in control. Well, guess what? We're not in control. This virus is controlling the United States of America and the world at this point in time. So you're not in control. So ask for help before it is too late. Before you make a mistake. Before you don't do something that you could have done if you were thinking properly, if you were managing your stress properly. As I close my presentation, I encourage all of you who are listening to help those around you, both professionally and personally, to remain calm as we work our way through this pandemic. Take care of your personal wellness. Take appropriate precautions for isolation without getting paranoid. Find a new daily rhythm. We all have a habit. Every day we do things in order. Well, this pandemic has created a disorder in our lives. Well, you're going to have to find a new rhythm. You're going to create new habits. Not necessarily a bad idea. Change is not bad. Change can be good. But find a new rhythm. Stay happy and motivated by relying on verifiable information that you trust. Take care of yourself, and God bless each and every one of you. Back to you, Dan.
Well, thank you, Chief. Always great information to share. Always great to hear from you. Real quick, I want to just touch on one thing that Chief Buckman mentioned. He mentioned the Yellow Ribbon Report. So for those who are on this who are not familiar with the Yellow Ribbon Report, that was a report put out by the Volunteer and Combination Officer section of the IAFC. So if you go to the IAFC.org website, and look for it there. That's where you'll find that. And it's really got some very helpful information and points for you to review on that. So that's where you'll find that reference. So Mr. Shurr, good to see you again. Thank you as always. We'll turn this over to you now.
All right. Thank you, Dan and John. This has been great so far. So let's see what I can do to add some value. So the things that, the questions that we were getting from the first couple of webinars were really focused on how do I deal with people that aren't rising up to the challenge or that aren't being good communicators. How do I resolve conflicts or disagreements? And so I thought that I would share 5 steps for resolving conflicts with you today. Before we do that, we've got to talk a little bit about how we communicate with ourselves in our own head. So if you understand the way that we communicate with ourselves, especially under pressure, then we can make adjustments, because people who are mesmerizing leaders are always focused on making adjustments within themselves first, and then focusing on influencing other people. But we always got to start with ourselves first. So there was a famous family and marriage therapist named Virginia Satir, brilliant woman. She was called the mother of family therapy. And she said that there was 5 ways that we communicate, and that 4 of them are dysfunctional. So let's go through them very quickly. So the first one is what we call the placator. This is a style of communication that we use when we're trying to avoid conflict. When you're thought of as, you're a nice guy, you know, you don't like to rock the boat. We don't like confrontation. And so what we tend to do is we try to keep everybody happy instead of having the conversations that need to be had or saying the things that need to be said. We just need to say them in a way that's direct and compassionate. But when we're placating people, then we're not really saying what needs to be said. We're going all the way around. We're not being direct. We're very compassionate or kind, but we're not intervening when we need to. And so we'll tend to look the other way or go hide in our office instead of addressing the situation head on. And often, because of the stress that we have, or we don't feel like we're getting what we need, we end up showing up more passive aggressive. And that did not have to happen. But that's what happens when we are placating. The next style of communication is what we call the blamer. So the blamer is always pointing the finger at somebody else. It's always someone else's fault. They don't take responsibility for anything. They're always focused on whose fault is it, who's to blame. They're very good at deflecting, getting people to look over here so that they don't see what they're doing over here. And they tend to lose their temper very quickly. If you question them, even just in a friendly way, they can get really angry, they can get upset, they can become aggressive because they feel that that is somehow a threat. So blamers, again, these all come from insecurity. So this is how blamers show up. Then you have the third form of communication, what we call the distractor. So the distractor is always getting caught up in everything else except what's most important. They tend to get caught up in drama. They tend to get caught up in gossip. They're always in other people's business. Instead of focusing on what they need to do in this moment for themselves and for the people that they're leading, they tend to get caught up in and hope that we just sweep it under the rug and it will go away on its own, which we all know does not happen. It just leads to more problems. That's why it's in the dysfunctional category. The fourth way that we communicate, especially under pressure, is what we call the computer. And this is when someone just hides behind their intellect. They become very much about the logic and not about the emotion at all. But the best leaders are emotional, right? They understand how other people are feeling. They have compassion. They have empathy. And but computers, what happens is if you feel threatened, if you feel insecure, if you feel like you're going to be looked at as weak, then what will happen is you will draw back and become aloof or distant, right? You'll be just about the facts and you'll say things like, well, it's not my problem, or, you know, my job's not to raise you. You know, you're adults. You should handle your own business, right? And that, of course, is not how you install trust. That's not how you strengthen relationships. But often when we feel angry or when we feel threatened, then we will withdraw back and we come off very arrogant or very non-caring. So Virginia Satir said that the fifth way of communication is what she called the leveler. And the leveler is all about transparency. It's all about saying, hey, I'm enough, you're enough, we're both good. What can we do to make these situations better? What can we do to improve our conversation? Even if we disagree, we can still be respectful so that we can go toe to toe with this disagreement that we might have, but we're going to still walk away friends as a result. And so being a leveler is all about being honest and direct. It's about having compassion and being, brutally honest. It's about being accountable and also empathetic of how others feel. Instead of just immediately shooting from the hip, you think about how your words are going to affect other people, because there's people in the world that think like you and there's people in the world that don't. There's people in the world that think the opposite of you. And so you want to show up in a way that's respectful to all opinions if you are wanting to have greater influence. And that's really what this is all about. So when we're resolving conflict, it's about increasing your ability to resolve disagreements in a respectful way. So here's a 5-step approach for resolving conflicts. Number 1, be clear in your intentions. What is the best possible outcome that you want for this situation, and how can you move towards it, right? Before you jump in and you immediately start taking action, take a pause, especially like what Chief John Buckman keeps saying, we are in new times. This is a different situation than what we are used to. And so the old tricks that we used to go to won't work in this situation. In this situation, we need to pause. We need to think for a second. We need to figure out, all right, what's going to be the outcome that's best for everyone right now? And what do we need to do to move towards that, right? So you start with what Stephen Covey in his famous book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he said, start with the end in mind. That's one of his habits. Think about what is the ultimate outcome that I want before you start taking action. That way, you know what you're moving towards. Right? Instead of just kind of winging it and then getting sidetracked and then saying one thing one day and then one thing another day, if you keep sharing conflicting messages and your story changes every single day, then that's going to build mistrust. And so we want to make sure that we're thinking things out before we jump into action. So always ask yourself, what's the best possible outcome that I want before you start to move forward? The second thing you do is you intervene to prevent harm as quickly as you can. So what that means is you want to get involved if you see a situation from the moment you start to notice it. If you see 2 people in the department having a riff, somebody starts to get upset, somebody starts to get angry, people are cracking under pressure, people are being more sarcastic, people are breaking the rules. You're not supposed to be having all this physical distancing and they're not doing it. I saw the governor of New York shutting down the parks because people weren't listening to the rules. They were going out and hanging out and having picnics in the park. That is not social distancing, right? Even though I don't like that term, I think it should be physical distancing and more social connection through our technology. So what you want to do is you want to put the fire out when it's small, right? As we say, kill the monster when it's little. Don't let it feed, because then it's a much bigger monster to handle. And so you want to think about putting out fires from the moment they spark. Now that means that you have to be a leveler to do that. And you might be someone who more is the placater. You don't like conflict. You don't like those situations. But this is a new time and it's an opportunity for you, like John is saying, to find a new groove, find a new rhythm, find a new song that you can listen to, and then get intentional and then intervene. Go head on and do it in a respectful way. So how do you do it in a respectful way? That's step number 3. You find people's strengths and you speak in a way that offers opportunity rather than criticism. A lot of us, I remember I grew up in the 70s and there was nothing but sarcasm. Everybody was ripping on everybody. We were all ripping on each other. Parents were ripping on their kids. Everybody was cutting each other down. It's what we did back then. And I don't know if people really realized how much damage words could do and how hurtful things that you're saying off the cuff can really cut to the bone from somebody, especially if you're a leader and you're criticizing or ripping on somebody in front of everybody else. That can really hurt them. That can really damage them. They might not think you're horrible. They will think that they are horrible, right? And what we want to do is avoid that. We want to make sure that we're speaking confidence into our people, that we're being honest about the situation, but we're always lifting people up. So you find their strengths, you figure out what they're doing well. We live in a society where people are catching everybody else doing everything wrong. We're busting everybody out. And people that need to be held accountable, this is great. I'm glad that we live in an age where we're able to finally hold powerful people accountable most of the time. Okay. However, we also got to make sure that we are catching people doing things right, because whatever you focus on the most, you get more of. If you're watering flowers, you're going to get more flowers. If you're watering the weeds, you're going to get more weeds. So pay attention to what you're watering. So you want to seek out a positive intention from everyone involved in the conflict. When you're asking them questions, try to figure out what it is that they are trying to accomplish through what they're saying or what they're doing. That's the positive intention. It might not come across that way, but there's usually a positive intention for all human behavior. Even the behavior that doesn't look like it's acceptable, there's typically a positive intention in that person's mind for them behaving the way that they do. If you are intervening between two people, try to figure out what the positive intention is for both sides of the conversation and bring it out, and then verify it. Is this what you meant? Is this what you were trying to get at? So that, maybe you say it in a different way, or you say it in, using different words, or you come up with an example or a metaphor. A lot of times when people are communicating, they just say one thing and they just keep saying it over and over, and perhaps they get louder. What you want to do is make sure that you give different ways of saying things until the other person finally gets it. They're like, oh, that's what you mean. Okay. So we want to seek first to understand instead of just be understood. A lot of times in an argument, we want to become a trial lawyer and prove why we're right instead of trying to understand where the other person is coming from, so that we have more pieces of the puzzle, right? You can't see the whole puzzle if you only have a piece or two of it. And if you're communicating with someone else who has a few more pieces, you put those pieces together and now you can start to see the bigger picture. And so we want to always be focusing on a positive intention. So let me give you an example of that. Okay. So let's say that you have two high-performing employees, and one of them starts to make some comments that are really negatively impacting those around them. Now, as the leader, you might approach that person and say something like this: that comment that you made was very disrespectful, and it offended enough people that it made its way all the way to my office. You need to clean up your language, or make sure that you're not saying things to new people that could be taken the wrong way. It doesn't matter if you meant it that way or if you disagree with me on this. Clean up your act if you want to stay with this department. Okay, so it's come across as very direct and very threatening. Now, you could also say it this way: you are a highly respected player on this team, and many people look up to you, especially the new guys. Sometimes we make comments that don't seem like a big deal to us because we have more perspective, or we aren't as emotionally attached to a subject as the others might be. Yet others may not respond may respond very differently. Some might think, sometimes we might think, well, who cares what they think, or that's not my problem. But we need our most influential players like you to be more aware of what you say. If you think it could be taken out of context at all, it's better to let it go or say something more constructive. What do you think about this? Okay, so now you're lifting them up while you're giving them support. You don't have to go on, but you can find a way to try to save face, so to speak. If they feel, especially if you're doing this in front of others, which I don't usually recommend that, but you want to find a way where you're lifting them up, not trying to make them look bad or embarrass them, because that will only cause them to dig in and get worse. And at the end, you ask them, what do you think? Because you want their feedback. You ask them that question to see if it's sinking in, if they're understanding what you're trying to do. And hopefully they are. And if they're not, then you might have to come up with another way of saying it. Step 4, once you've had the conversation with the parties who are in conflict, then you want to debrief all other relevant parties, right? So after you start this conversation, if there's people that are directly involved with this conversation, you need to go to them and tell them what's happening, especially if there are other leaders, other people. Maybe you're talking to somebody, you're putting out a fire with people that aren't your direct reports, but you're intervening as the leader because you saw it, and so you're handling it instead of saying, well, that's the other leader's problem. No, you're stepping in as a leader and you're sharing feedback and you're trying to resolve it. But then you would go to those people's leaders and you would tell them what happened so that you are controlling the story, because there's always going to be a story that floats around, and you don't want 20 different interpretations of the story. You don't want people making up their own story. You have to control the story. You have to tell them what the story is so that they don't make it up on their own. And everybody needs to hear the same story. So you want to make sure that you are sharing straight from you what happened, so that the leaders all of a sudden aren't hearing all these other stories coming from other people that aren't accurate. And then number 5, remain aware of how your response to the situation influences those around you. Always appreciate the fact that others will replicate the behavior of their leaders. So I will have leaders that will come up to me from different companies, and they will say, oh, my people just don't care. Oh, my people are lazy. Oh, they just don't want to work hard, right? And as I start to talk to those people, I find out, no, that's not what's happening at all. They just don't feel appreciated. They get criticized. They get knocked down. They're always being yelled at no matter what they do well. It's never good enough. It often comes back to the leadership style, the leader, not the person that is leading, or not the people that you're leading. And so that's why as leaders, mesmerizing leaders, we always take a look at what's going on inside of ourselves. So we have to be the example. So let's go through this as a quick review, and then you can always take this page out of the handout that you're going to have and then print it out and then paste it somewhere so that you can see it. So just remember that an average leader is going to react without a plan. A mesmerizing leader is going to get intentional before responding. Average leaders will often ignore or hide or act too busy to deal with situations that need to be handled, where mesmerizing leaders quickly intervene and put the fire out before it becomes something that's out of control. Average leaders are going to placate, blame, distract, or become a computer. We need to make sure we're being the leveler. I'm good, you're good. Let's be honest, direct, and compassionate. Average leaders tend to inject their own opinion and attempt to shut down communication. I don't want to hear it, just do what I tell you. Okay? Where mesmerizing leaders seek out the positive intention of all parties involved, and they help lift them up so that people feel heard. Remember my acronym for leadership. I call it LOVE. You want to love your people, L-U-V. It stands for listen to, understand, and validate. Average people will return back to what they were doing, but mesmerizing leaders debrief all relevant parties to control the story. And then average leaders tend to forget about it. But mesmerizing leaders are always kind of thinking about, how can I improve my response to this situation in the future? Because they're always looking for, how can I grow? How can I improve? How can I get better? And that's what makes them mesmerizing. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about this, I do have a mesmerizing leadership class that takes off in April. It is all online. These are the times when you really need to participate in a leadership class, because people are emotional, and this whole program is on the soft skills. This whole program is built on giving you the soft skills of leadership, of communication, of reducing conflicts, of building rapport and morale. I'm in partnership with the IAFC's VCOS, so it's a approved course, and you're going to get a lot out of it. So if you're interested in that, then you can find out more at the where we have all of the replays and we have all the handouts at www.survivingtothriving.me/webinar. Thank you very much. Dan, back to you.
Well, thank you, Tim. That was really great stuff. Really appreciate you sharing that. So we are open for Q&A for any questions that anybody has. You can type those in through your screen there, and we can read those off and answer those. While we're waiting for those, hoping, we've had some really great questions in our prior ones. As Tim said, the recordings of each of these 3 webinars from this series are all be posted online. Parts 1 and Part 2 are already online. Part 3 will be added soon after this session today. So those are resources for people who haven't been able to join us for those. By all means, feel free to share them through your organizations. I do want to just touch real quickly on one other piece, just sort of tying 2 of the pieces that Chief Ludwig and Chief Buckman talked about in their parts earlier today. Chief Ludwig talked about how finances are going to be very challenging for a lot of fire departments moving forward, like every municipality. And to me, that really ties into a piece that Chief Buckman talked about, which was the role of your PIO and communications folks in your departments. And as Chief Buckman said, you know, in the fire service, we're really bad about bragging about what we do. You know, we show lots of pictures of flames and stuff, but there's so much that every fire department does on a regular basis that really is unseen and unheard. And, it's not going to address funding today or this month, but in the world of controlling what you can control, we know coming down the pike next year, funding is going to get a whole lot tighter. Every municipal budget is going to get a whole lot tighter. Tax revenues are going to be down. People's expenses are up. Every form of municipality is going to be on tighter budgets next year. And that means taxpayers, in many instances, are going to be asked to approve higher than normal tax rates to fund necessary budgeting. So one of the things that's in your bucket of control today is communicating the things that you're doing for your community and in your community, both during this pandemic, before this pandemic, and the things that you continue doing afterwards, all the pub ed stuff, all the great work that you do in your communities. I would really encourage you to ramp up the communication of every single thing that you're doing to benefit your community starting today. And because the more that your community is aware of and sees and knows all the things that you do, other than responding to burning buildings and ambulance calls, which in many instances are a small percentage of what you do every day, the more they see all the good that you do on a regular basis in your community, the more willing they're going to be to approve whatever tax rate hike is going to be needed to fund your continuing operations. So we know that's coming. We can't control that, but you can control your communications out to your communities now to prepare them for that, to hopefully turn them on your side for when we get to those tough budget votes that we know are going to be coming down the pike. So I don't see any questions coming in just yet. Don't be afraid to type those in. Nobody here can bite you through a screen. Chief Buckman, do you want to add a few words while we're hopefully waiting for those?
I will, Dan. Thank you. I can't see myself on the screen, but I'm going to show you this book here. This is called The Golden Book by Dale Carnegie on how to win friends and influence people. This is a book that was originally written in 1936. I went to this training 40 years ago. I still carry this book with me today. It has lots of good advice. I would encourage you to look at this book and maybe consider reading it. His other book that he has that was published in 1948 is How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. If you, like me, I am a worrywart. I worry about lots of things. Worry is not always bad, but worry can be bad and can add stress to your life and to hurt your body as well. I encourage you to get that book. And you say, oh, I don't have time to read. I don't like to read. You don't have to read the whole book in one day, either one of these books. Maybe schedule 15 to 20 minutes a day to read, to look at something not related to coronavirus, not related to the job, maybe even not these two books, but find something that brings a little happiness, a little joy to your life. So like Gary Ludwig talked about, he's written several books. He reads a lot of books. I read a lot of books as well. And so I encourage you to look at books that are not related to the fire service, that have nothing to do with firefighting, that are management, leadership, personal wellness books. I encourage you to look at those and get outside of our realm for a little while. Dan, back to you.
Totally agree with that. So I don't see questions coming in. So why don't we turn to some closing comments we've done each time. Tim, we'll start with you this time.
Well, I appreciate everybody that was on this, and what I recommend is that you share the replay with your friends, with your colleagues, with anybody in a leadership position, because this is some very quality information, and it addresses a lot of really key issues that are kind of important all the time, but especially now. And so it's crucial that people have access to these tools. And there's so much noise out there in the world, and there's so much stuff going on that people really don't know how to access tools and insights that were provided to you by some of the nation's best leaders today. And so I want you to, I encourage you, I plead for you to share this with those who need it most, because sometimes people are going so busy, they don't take the time. You know, often it's the people that need it the most that are not getting access to the information that was provided here today. So I hope that you please do your part. You've already done your part in showing up. So virtual high five, that's awesome. Okay. And so now what we want to do is the second part, which is take these tools and resources, put them on your Facebook group, call your friends up, tell your buddies in the department, pull out the laptop and say, hey, let's watch this replay. There's some really cool information here. You guys will like it, right? And that will help a lot.
Great, thanks, Tim. Chief Buckman, you got a few closing words for us?
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. It's been a joy for us to develop this information for you. We're not saying that we give you all the answers. Our job is to stimulate you to think. Think about yourself before you think about others. Make sure you take care of yourself before you take care of the others. Make sure you take care of your family before you take care of others. And so with that, that's my advice to you. Don't forget about me. Thank you, Dan.
So I want to echo off of that and go back to two things that we talked about real briefly in our first part of this webinar series. You have to take care of yourselves as leaders, and one of that is knowing where your breakage points are, and knowing when it's okay and that it's okay to tap out for a bit if you need to, whether it's to go for a walk, a hike, a bike ride, spending time with your family, which is critical. You cannot become all consumed with any aspect of this. So you have to make time for yourselves and tap out of the responsibilities every now and then, and know who your other leaders are in your organization that you can lean on and gain further assistance with that. So really be aware of that. And then the other part is, this may be the end of this particular webinar series, but what we talked about is that, we talked about in part one, is that none of the leaders that are encountering these issues are alone. It is lonely at the top, it can feel alone, but don't be struggling in a room with four walls and a door closed. Pick up a phone, send an email, send a text, do a FaceTime, do a Zoom meeting with anybody. My phone's ringing all day, every day right now, between phone calls and texts and emails of people in the same position talking to each other and leaning on each other for guidance. So if you can't find that within your own organization, find your friend, find your mentor, find your buddy, your old classmate that you haven't touched base with in a while. People are in the same spot as you. Don't ever hesitate to reach out to them. It's the healthiest thing you can do right now, and it helps gain perspective from others that are dealing with the same, or if not, then very similar issues. So thank you all for joining us. Really greatly appreciate it. Tim Shurr, always a pleasure, always appreciate it. Chief Buckman, always a pleasure to talk to you and gain insight from you. So thank you both for putting this together, and be safe and be well, everybody.